All right. Next up, we have Allison Cobb, who is the author of After We All Die, Plastic, an autobiography, Born to, and Greenwood, which was originally published by Factory School and now has a new edition released in 2018 by Nightboat Books. Cobb works for the Environmental Defense Fund and lives in Portland, Oregon, where she co-hosts the Switch Reading Art and Performance series and performs in the collaboration Suspended Moment. Welcome.
I forgive you. I forgive you, fingers. I forgive you, wrists and palms. I forgive you, web of veins, the nameless knuckles, 27 bones, the nails and moons below. I forgive you, feet, the toes and toenails, metatarsals arching up, cuneiform, the cuboids, and navicular. I forgive you, sole of foot, fibrofatty pressure chambers, dense packed nerve and tissue, the spring ligament. I forgive you, ankle, lovely, with twin bone swells. I forgive you, calf abundant, kneecap, knee joint extra complex and temperamental. I forgive you, bone and sinew, blood vessel, and braid of muscle. I forgive you, tidal lymph. I forgive you, skin, the coast on which all washes up. I forgive you, thigh and buttock, anus, vagina, clitoris, urethra, mons, a rounded mass of fatty tissue, inner and outer lips, the smooth stretch of perineum. I forgive you, sacroiliac, the bone wings laced with tendon, the pelvic inlet and the brim. I forgive you, coiled intestines lined in tissue soft as velvet, the uterus and eggs inside of ovaries, the fluting tubes fallopian, the docile stomach sac. I forgive you, my esophagus, moist mucosa, heart and lung lobes, liver, kidneys, pancreas and gallbladder, the spleen, all the inner organs curled together in the dark and muttering like clocks, like memories of clocks. I forgive you. I forgive you, breasts, your lobes and lobules, ducts and alveoli rising to the darkened areola and the nipple passage outward. I forgive you, golden seams of fat in semi-liquid state, encasing in your oily cells the poisons of the world. I forgive you, mouth, the teeth and budded tongue, the epiglottis, pharynx, and the tough-ringed trachea, the larynx with its cords for making sound. I forgive you, nasal cavity and sinuses, the ear canal and clear-walled eyeballs, all the head holes opened to the rain of light, the floating atoms of the air, the jacked-together molecules of the stupid human world. I forgive you, ropey muscles of the neck and face, so overstrained from constantly composing mirrors. I forgive you, brain, 3 pounds of convoluted meat plastered with gray nerve cells wrapped in blood-rich tissue floating in your own sweet bath of fluid. I forgive you, spinal column, sprouting from the brainstem, flaring wires to spark electric charges through dumb tissue. I forgive you, glands, both tubular and alveolar, releasing streams of chemicals and mucus, sweat and milk and oil. I forgive you, every hair bowl, constantly dividing, pressing hardened protein shafts up toward the light. I forgive you, cells, all 100 trillion, the inner ocean that has ebbed and flowed across 3 million years. I forgive you, every part performing all the intricate and simple tasks that make this mass alive. I forgive you all for already having died. So that's the first poem of this book, After We All Died. And I wrote this book because I work for an environmental organization, and a lot of my colleagues were talking about this apocalypse that's coming. We live in the Anthropocene, the moments where humans are having a geologic scale impact on the planet, and there's an end coming. And I started thinking about, what if the end has already happened? As a lot of climate scientists say that it has. And also, what if the end has already happened to a lot of people? As Mónica said, many of us are already living our afterlives, the queers and indigenous communities and people of color. And what if we could embody that knowledge that we are living the end, that our way of being on the planet is untenable and we need something totally different? And if we could really live in that imagination, maybe we could start to think toward something completely new. So I tried to write this book embodying that knowledge. And I'm so happy to have the chance to get to read here with Mónica. We had not met before tonight, but we have a lot in common as artists. And I just want to thank the poet Martha Reed, who is really the reason that we are both here. Martha is the publisher of Mónica's first book and was a good friend of mine who died very suddenly, in fact, before she and Mónica even had a chance to meet. So Martha was an incredible champion and fighter for poetry, people of all kinds, an incredibly passionate person, and I was so lucky to know her while she was here. So thank you, Martha, for bringing us here, and thank you so much to the bookstore and to Celia and Rebecca and Fernando for having us in this beautiful space. It's such a treat. As Mónica was reading, I kept being like, oh my God, we have so much in common. And we were supposed to be on a panel together about necropoetics, and you all are bearing the brunt of that panel not happening because we're giving you necropoetics tonight. So I'm just going to keep the theme going with one more poem from After We All Died. This is Poem of Force, and I wrote it after Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson in the summer of 2014. It makes reference to the fact that I grew up in Los Alamos in New Mexico, which is where the first atomic bombs were built. Poem of Force. The shining part of shields and weapons and up-armored trucks. The glitter sprays of sun I hold my hands up in, a kind of scream from dreams. I throw my flame-burnt bird beak heart. No hope is what the mother told the press, a tune that has no words and never stops. The bullet works by hitting with such force, the force of a Mack truck, though it's just a 1-inch slug of densest lead. It leaves a trail like a freeway crash through bone and flesh because it flies so fast. It's a primitive technology, a pointed bit of soft and silver poison metal wrapped inside a gleaming coat of copper. A white man in a gray suit aiming a gun in each hand precedes the news report. It's an ad for a TV show on TNT called Legends. At the office, the old assistant put a sign up that said, "Force yourself. Force yourself down to the ground and spread your legs and keep your hands above your head," the cop kept screaming. A helmet and a gas mask make the man seem only weapon. The word force means body of armed men. My town holds some of the planet's most dangerous substances that kill by moving invisibly through cells and scrambling the atoms that make up flesh and bone. A mercenary army guards the stuff with guns. We used to park at a gate to the lab to make out and wait. Before too long, a guard would come with gun and light and shine it on our skin, and sometimes let us stay there, steaming up the panes at the edge of the cliff where the radiation leaked into rock of hardened ash from an ancient volcano. They never scared me once. I never had to think of force from sunglassed men in uniform. A white and privileged chick, I always cried when I got stopped, and usually I knew the cop, Officer Grecian, Captain Tom, church members and friends. They almost always let me off. The violence I knew came in much more intimate forms, without a gun, in homes and cars. The physicist Otto Frisch wrote that asking them to stop the work on the atomic bomb once it began, and then refrain from using it on people, would be like asking a boxer to sense in the heat of the fight the moment his opponent lost his strength and started the slide to defeat, and stop pummeling him with his fists into unconsciousness. Can you hear the global engine gunning, getting louder? Once it's out and hot and loaded up, it's just too hard to stop. So that was after we all died. You guys can breathe, it's okay. Everybody's like, and then, keeping the mood light, I'm going to read from the reissue of this book, Greenwood, which is about a cemetery. And the morning of September 11th, 2001, I was on the subway under the World Trade Center when the first plane hit. And in the weeks and months afterwards, living in New York City, which smelled like a funeral pyre for almost a year, just trying to inhabit the city and figure out how to live, I happened to move across the street from this 19th century cemetery, which was 500 acres, so more than half the size of Central Park, the biggest green space in Brooklyn, which for those of you who've been there, lived there, know is not like Boston with your incredible green spaces. That was like really kind of the one place in Brooklyn with a huge expanse of green. People weren't allowed to go in there and play, like the neighborhood kids would play basketball in the street because you weren't allowed to play in there, but I could go in there and walk. And so I just started walking around in there, and then I started taking an interest in it and noticing it a little bit, and then I did some research about it, and this book is what resulted. It's a hybrid text, so it's got poetry and prose in it. It's got research, word etymologies, quotes from other people, so you'll probably hear all that as I'm reading it. And I'm just going to read a little bit from the first section. This is the book that was published 10 years ago, but has just been reissued, and it's for sale on that table there along with Monica's book. The first year I didn't set foot inside the cemetery. The still smoking hole across the water held my attention, a smell curling inside the minds of the million-headed city, even in sleep. A weather breath resurrects. The second summer, I thought of taking an old boyfriend from LA for a tour. First public opening of Greenwood's catacombs. We crossed the street, joined a flock of Manhattanites looking around at nowhere Brooklyn. The catacombs turn out to be American, a filing system. The long, whitewashed tunnel built into a hill exhales its blank air. We shuffle past dark niches, each topped by a soil-clogged skylight. Our flashlights find stack after stack of sealed drawers with plaques. No bodies, no bones. Among the crowd, I see Micah Guerin, who will be kidnapped in Iraq while shooting a documentary about looted artifacts. Fact means not true, but to make the fact of art a trace. My guest also is named Micah, who prophesied the destruction of Jerusalem. This one made an anti-Bush book out of World War II propaganda posters. Later, the Washington Post will reveal as a lie his detailed description of jumping into Panama as an Army Ranger, a fact I wore like jewelry. On TV, we will watch Micah Guerin's tearful fiancé and West Village neighbors. This one will convince his captors he seeks to expose the truth about the war, and they will let him go. Lucky, a word of mysterious origin. Lucky, we all said, that we came up from the subway after the planes hit, but before the buildings weakened enough to collapse. And then, fall, I walk into the cemetery almost daily, between trips home to New Mexico for rounds of what is called my mother's chemotherapy, a Frankenstein of healing plus alchemy, to chemical transmuted from the ancient name for Egypt, black earth, or Greek for sap, a quickness, the place. I get lost in it, acres, 478, interred approximately 600,000, plus full fall trees among the oldest left in Brooklyn, a road enclosed in oak light. Every turn makes me take a breath. I dilate and respire, so I am more like trees, a net of breathing. My footsteps sound outside my head and in. At first I'm afraid a little, not of ghosts or seeing bodies, maybe just of staying lost, or of coming across someone live, a cemetery worker who might ask me what I'm doing here. Soon I understand, which means to lift. The cemetery maintains its own quotidian, a rhythm. See the army of guys in green uniforms, the greens, I think, engines strapped to backs, blowing leaves off paths. Don't fall, plus constant funerals. Custom held that people be buried only in the sanctified ground of churches, but epidemics of yellow fever and cholera swept the city, and the dead overflowed the churchyards. In 1823, Francis Allen described the graveyard of downtown Manhattan's Trinity Church as saturated with flesh. Bones had to be dug up to make room for new bodies, and New York sometimes had to ship its dead to Boston or Philadelphia, as it now does its trash. A word decayed from the sound of cut down woods. See, twig, splinter, and sprig. What language did this blood once speak? I meant it to be hardly words, not trees. First snowfall. I follow a path scraped down to stiff grass to the grave of Joseph O. Benke. Beside it sags a half-melted snowman, thorned branch sticking out of its back. 1958 to 2004, Operation Iraqi Freedom 2. Lived for his family, died for God and country. A soldier carved into the stone kneels with head down, rifle propped in one hand, helmet dangling from the other. The name Miriam P. is inscribed below, awaiting her dates. Word, a lamp, awaiting fire. In the 1940s, grave owners at Greenwood donated the wrought iron fences around their plots as scrap for bullets and ships. Today, in many places, only the gates remain, connecting nothing. More than a dozen condolence notes appear on the Benke tribute site at fallenheroesmemorial.com. Specialist Kovalik ends his note, I still feel a bit guilty though, and you know why. Take care, Benke. The first use of the word would to mean insane appears in the year 725. They be bitten by the wood dog, the devil, and be fallen wood themselves. Numb with cold, I turn from Benke's grave back toward the gate, head down against the wind. By the edge of valley water, I notice a stone inscribed Martha with a seal for the Women's Overseas Service League, half sunk in dirt. I scrape off leaves and snow with a stick to uncover the last name, Effie. a fat white caterpillar. It moves more and more slowly until it freezes in the frigid air. I shall appear blank, a gleaming creature. And then the last section of this. In spring, the great egret appears. I first see it one day as I'm rounding the corner toward Valley Water. It starts a little leap in me, unfolding into flight. I begin to watch for it in each of the cemetery's 4 glacial ponds. It hunts most often in Crescent Water, a little scum-covered lake by the Gothic tomb of William Niblo, owner of Broadway's most fashionable 19th century theater. He stocked the pond with goldfish, filled the grounds with shrubbery, vines, and flowers, and hosted parties here before he died. I sit on a wooden bench in front of Niblo. Ductile iron Liberty Bench, New Jersey, reads the curved metal arm. The decorative iron scroll is stamped China. The egret stands perfectly still, tilted out over the water. It has hardly a head, just eyes and beak, honed across 7 million years into a living point. Hunters nearly wiped out the egret during the 19th century to fulfill demand for its cascading breeding plumage on women's hats. In 1892, a merchant in Florida shipped 130,000 egret skins to New York. I also want to possess this creature, a kind of appetite, a trace. I sit looking at it for a long time, sun buzzing down on the crown of my head. In my ears, the drone of an engine pumping air into the water. This is the sound of the war against algae, ancient one-celled creature somewhere between plant and animal that feeds off light and can live almost anywhere. It spreads across tree trunks and tombstones also, giving the place, on cloudy days, a green sheen. The self in this place is always late for work. I rise to go, but a cormorant pops up through the scum and flips a bright descendant of Niblo's goldfish down its gullet. Suddenly, the little pond seems fabulous, an opera. The egret stilts up toward a tree, releasing a smooth spray of shit, as white as it. I see it snatch a fat dragonfly, wings sticking like a bow out of its beak. Applause, the graveyard. So a lot more happens in the graveyard. Got to get the book if you want to find out what happens next. I saw wonderful wildlife creatures in the graveyard, many of the same ones I saw today walking around Lady Bird Lake with my friends. It was delightful to know that we share those connections, the animals that can live in the margins of urban spaces that bring us a lot of beauty. I'm going to read one last poem. Again, something in common with Mónica is the presence of our mothers in our lives, strong presences. My mom died last summer after a very brief bout with cancer. So this is about that. It's called Catch. What moment was the moment my mom died? We weren't sure, my dad and I. We hold that hard gift close between the us that makes us selves who stood beside her, bird-like, curled in. Oh, it is a moment, breath, and then it stops. That's real. Declare the time. We had a clock there, red with numbers. Mom. She left before. I held her hand. No living touch came back. She left before her animal. I never, past self, would have written this. Naive, I thought, to cling to souls of individuals like characters in books. We're bones and flesh and maybe light, I thought, no more. We just disintegrate to light and dirt. We do, I think. But Mom, that one specific form remains, or did, or does. "Hi, Mom." I half say, joking, "Hi." She says it back, but not in speech. She's not in speech or space or words crunch bone, too animal, too fixed, but she communicates in feel force. 9/11, when I woke, I felt her soft around embrace. Much earlier, days after she had died, my dad went cycling through guilt for all the things he'd failed her in life. The ice he left outside, she slipped and broke her shoulder. Speeding down the freeway as he spoke, I rode behind him in the sun along the river. Fast force then, I felt her shake it off as nothing, like a fly on horseflesh. Pah, it's nothing. Flick it off. A shake and then a leap like joy. I knew my sister felt it too. My dad, too sunk in self, in grief. "I feel just joy from her," my sister said it gentle and with love for all his hurt. But I felt something else, her bursting, fierce impatience for our joining her in joy. It crackled, sparks, catch, it says, catch up.